Lecture 5, Professor Jarvis, Facility Prep and Event Management. When we talk about facility preparation for a sporting event, there's key personnel that need to be considered. Volunteers, paid employees, and senior executives all fall in that category. And when you look at senior executives, you do want to understand their role and what their role is going to be in your event. Many senior executives don't want an active role, would rather supervise off to the side, while others would want to have an active participating role in the event. Be aware of that so that you can accommodate their style. With volunteer and paid employees, there are different duties that you're going to run across that you need to fill in job descriptions, some of which are listed here: general, security, event staffing, first aid, food service. When you look at large-scale events, and if they're kid-oriented, you need to know what other things are needed. Some events that are kid-oriented, you have to understand there's extra security involved, restrooms, and making sure that alcohol, if it's sold at an event, that it's monitored closely. There are a lot of guidelines when you work with children, and understanding the amount of adults supervising kids is critically important. Understanding who's in charge of the actual sport event is key. Those are the people that would really run through the red tape and protocol to get the event off the ground. Those are the folks who need to clear the hurdles with government, state officials, and federal representatives. These are larger scale events like the Los Angeles Marathon, ESPN X Games, Super Bowl, some of the larger scale events. One of the smaller scale events that are collegiate level or community based don't necessarily have as many hurdles and red tape protocol to go through, but you still would have someone in charge of that, making sure that those connections are made and double checking to assure that those don't need to occur if in fact they don't. When we talk about the nitty gritty of an event and planning an event, it's important to physically inspect the area prior to the event taking place. So several times you need to have on-site meetings to understand parameters and the details of running the event, facilitating the event, and then the post-event breakdown. It's a really bad idea to do things over the phone or via Skype in areas where you can't actually physically see. There could be limitations and areas where you could address if you're on site with your staff. Other things that are important, the very small details, is how tickets are being sold, and your athletes, making sure athletes are taken care of. With sporting events, athletes are your sellers. People are there to see the athletes. They like the venue and the arenas, but really they're there to support the athletes and to see the athletes perform. Having them taken care of is critically important. Alongside your sponsors, those folks also need to be taken care of and paid attention to, making sure that the fulfillment on your end is happening for the sponsorship contract, and understanding contractual obligations with sponsors is something that needs to be addressed prior to the event. The sponsors will be taking a look and counting how many times their ads and their sponsors are being shown on the jumbotrons and throughout the event and the venue itself. Little things make a really big difference. When we talk about large-scale events that need sanitation, marathons, running events, outside sporting events, those are critically important, making sure that that is covered and you have a staff member who is handling those pieces of the details. Media and technology, making sure that they're properly taken care of. A really good example of an event that has large-scale media and technology preparation is the X Games. The winter games are usually in Colorado, and the summer games are usually in Los Angeles. And those take days to prep for technology and media, housing needs, running cables, and making sure all satellite connections are up and running way before the event even occurs. So that's an example of major media and technology needs. Next, we talk about box office and ticketing, making sure that every consumer has a way to purchase tickets for your event. Old-fashioned phone usually isn't used very often, but making sure that that's accessible to them. Window walk-up, internet, brokers, mail orders, and kiosks. Those are all keys in making sure that there's more than one way to purchase tickets to your event is going to make it easier for you to collect revenue for your event. Security. When we talk about security, you have great examples of security, but we only see the bad examples the media portrays of security that wasn't ready or prepared for a large-scale event. You'll see a lot of security issues of post-championships with sporting teams. Most recently, Seattle Seahawks rioted in the streets after they won championship, and they're moving on into the Super Bowl. After every major win, usually it's professional level, but also collegiate level, you'll see that security is usually not as well prepared as they should be, and media really shows us that. So why is security so important? It's the lives of folks who are attending your event that's really in security's hands, so it's critically important for you to have that in place. And when we talk about how many staff are needed, it really depends on the size of the event and the notoriety of the event. And depending on location is also key. And if there's been past issues of violence at the event, then it's important to address it and to increase security. Some areas where you see security needed more and more is international and European soccer. Those events tend to get out of hand quickly, and those are always on the news, and the media highlights those events and what happens and what goes wrong. So when we talk about what happens in an emergency, we need to consider pre-planning for emergencies and making sure that security is aware of emergency plans and crisis management plans. And that's your role as a manager in putting on an event, making sure you have clear communication with your security personnel and that they have access to local police if they are in fact not police officers that you hire. And there's a lot of other questions out there when we talk about security. It can continue to grow, but preparation and being prepared is the key for security in an event. Parking and transportation. When we talk about bus transportation and bringing attendings to your event, drop-off and parking locations should be pre-planned. That should all be worked out prior to the event happening. Trains, buses, taxi drop-off locations. Those are all fee-based, and those should also be included in your revenue stream. At times, parking lots are not affiliated with the event venue and they require separate revenue, and it doesn't benefit you. And that's okay, but it just needs to be pre-planned. But a lot of times it can be a partnership between parking facilities and the event itself. Concessions and food service. Health department usually is involved, but you do need permit to be able to serve food. Food handling is something that needs to be done with certified staff. And food can really make or break your event. There's two comparisons here. With ease and convenience, we talk about hamburgers and hot dogs, sodas and chips, or complicated and expensive. Difference would be like barbecued beef sandwiches and gourmet sodas and things like that. But there is an ease of service that comes with that, and the revenue will be a difference as well. So you make more money off of more expensive food that you offer, but there is a ease and convenience issue with offering less expensive items. Depending on the event, your clientele may want more complicated and expensive items, and that would be a good thing and a benefit to do. Alcohol, do you offer it or not? There's risk involved when alcohol is present. We've all seen issues with fans out of control and enraged during sporting events, and that causes an issue with security and other fans. There are always issues with alcohol. There's ways to go around that. There's limiting how many drinks a patron can have. And there's also events that have no alcohol served at all. The downside to that is alcohol is a high revenue stream for sporting events, but there are risks involved. So you do have to weigh those out either way and determine what best fits your event. Emergency services. With the emergency plan, there should always be an emergency plan in place for your event. That includes local fire and police, and with active communication with you as the leader and the manager on site of a sporting event. In 2007, the Chicago Marathon had a disaster. You can Google search this particular event on your own. There was a high heat warning that day. The fluid stations ran out, and there was a death of a runner. And the sad part about that was communication and the emergency plan were the cause of the death. The runner was put in the ambulance and was having a mild heart issue at the time. The ambulance drivers got lost en route to the hospital, which was, I believe, only a few blocks away. And he died in transport. They could not get to the hospital because they got lost. That is a driving force behind all of the marathons updating and upgrading all of their emergency crisis plans and having more medical personnel on site. And most marathons now use that sad situation and have planned accordingly to not let that happen again. When we continue talking about medical services, having an EMT on site is required for most events, if not all events. Making sure there's proper signage of people to know where your EMT service is housed in your facility, and making sure all medical injuries are recorded. Should something happen and they come back to you as the manager, you need to have documentation of what injury occurred and who treated the person. And also the quickest route to the hospital is something that needs to be pre-planned out, and again brings up the 2007 Chicago Marathon disaster. That didn't happen, and so that's a key that needs to be addressed at every event. But overall, communication really is key when you look at medical services, and making sure you're communicating with those key personnel prior to the event and you have an open communication with them during the event. Post-event analysis should include your sponsors, making sure they were serviced correctly and to their satisfaction, employees understanding their role and them fulfilling their role, the financial success of the event, hoping that you met your proposed budget numbers, and then liability of the event, the incident reports and injuries that could have occurred, making sure you document that and follow through with those properly with your insurance companies. All critically important for your post-event analysis. Post-event surveys, those are include strategy with your employees, future marketing, and then community. And checking with people when we talk about community, asking them what they thought of it, if it impacted them with parking, congestion of traffic, people loitering outside the events, any kind of violence. Those types of community input is important for you to be able to handle and address should you choose to host the event again and should you choose to host it in the same location. But it really boils down to customer satisfaction, and relationship building is really as important for customers as it is for the employees.